When developing web applications, we're going to use a database to store information. In this movie, I'm going to show you how to get MySQL installed to be that database. If you already have MySQL installed, either because you've already been developing with it or because you've taken another training course that included it, then you won't need to install it again. Just skim over this movie to make sure that you already know everything that I cover. If you prefer to use a different database, such as SQLite or Postgres, you should be able to use those without making many changes to what I demonstrate in this tutorial. But we're going to be sticking with MySQL, and it'll be up to you to make any adjustments that you need for those other databases. There are 3 steps to getting MySQL installed. The first step is to install MySQL itself, and for that we have 2 ways of doing it. We can go to the MySQL website and download an installer and install it that way, and in the past that was typically the only way that you could get it installed. Or we can use Homebrew, the package manager that we installed earlier, and allow that to manage our MySQL installation for us. I'm going to show you the basics of how to do it with the installer, but then I'm actually going to perform the install using Homebrew because I think that's a slightly better option. And after we do that, we're going to need to set the default MySQL password. This is not an essential step, but it's a best practice, and I definitely recommend that you go ahead and lock down your copy of MySQL with the default password. And then for the final step, we're going to install the MySQL Ruby gem so that Ruby and our Ruby libraries, like Rails, will be able to talk to MySQL as fast as possible. Let's start by checking to see if we have MySQL installed. To check and see if you have MySQL installed, you simply type MySQL space -- version. You can't type -v, which is often a shortcut for version. You have to spell it all out, -- version. And you'll see that it returns to me that no such file or directory was found. And if I say which MySQL, you'll see that it also comes back with nothing because it can't find it. I don't have it installed. Now you may have gotten something different. It may have returned a version to you, in which case you may already have MySQL installed. And just about any version of MySQL will work for us. So don't worry if you might have something that's a little bit out of date. Any version 5 will be just fine. But it's not pre-installed by default on Mac OS X, so chances are you're going to need to add it if you haven't used it before. And there are 2 ways that we can install it. The first way is to go to the MySQL website, go to dev.mysql.com. Dev at the front indicates that's the developer zone, and look for the downloads link. From there, you want to look for MySQL Community Server. It's a little bit further down the page. This is the free open source version of MySQL. They also offer some more enterprise level versions that have more features, but we're not going to need those features. The Community Server version is suitable for use when developing on your local computer and also for deploying a finished Rails application to a production server as well. When people talk about using MySQL, chances are they're talking about using the MySQL Community Server. So let's click on that link. You'll notice that it has important platform support updates. That's a good place to find out information about outdated hardware and software that they don't support anymore. The main one that you would find there that might apply is that Power Macs, G4s and G5s, are no longer supported, only Intel-based processors. But by now, I think that's most everyone. We can then scroll down the page, and this is where the downloads actually take place. You can see that it's going to download the most recent version of MySQL. Don't worry if yours is different. Again, just make sure that you are getting the most recent version at the time. And then for selecting the platform, it's gone ahead and selected Mac OS X for me. But I still have a number of other choices that I need to make here. And there are 4 key criteria that determine which one we're going to choose. The first is the Mac OS X version that you have. So if you have 10.6, well, obviously you want to download a 10.6 version. If you have 10.7, or if you have 10.8, and there's not a 10.8 one listed here, or something even newer, go ahead and download the most recent one. These 10.7 versions do work with Mac OS 10.8. Next, you'll notice these choices come in 2 formats, either compressed tar archives or DMG archives. We're going to want the DMG archive. That's the one that lets us launch an installer from our desktop, just like with other Mac software. The tar archive is really for installing via the command line, and we're going to do it from the graphical user interface. Last of all, you'll need to either pick 64-bit or 32-bit. And the difference between them is going to be based on what kind of processor you have installed on your Mac. Chances are you have a 64-bit processor. All currently shipping Macs have been 64-bit for quite a while now. If you have an older Mac, though, you might want to check and see whether you have 32-bit or not. But if in doubt, choose 64-bit. How do you know if you have 32-bit? Well, you go up to About This Mac, and you look here for the processor, and if it says either Intel Core Solo or Intel Core Duo, then you have a 32-bit processor. Intel Core 2 Duo is not the same thing. The 2 is different. The 2 indicates that it's a 64-bit processor. So in my case, I'm going to want this 64-bit version. So 10.7, I actually have 10.8 for my operating system, and then 64-bit, the DMG archive. This is the one that I want. Click on download. You'll see big buttons here for login and sign up. But if you scroll just a little bit down the page, you'll see there's a link here, no thanks, just start my download. That allows us to bypass those. And then you can decide what you want to do with the file. You can save it to your desktop, or you can just open it with the disk image miner. Either one is fine. I'm not going to do that because I've done that before. That way you don't have to watch me download it. It's going to be sitting here on my desktop. You'll end up with something like this when it's done, and you'll just double click on it. And you'll see that we have some installers here. You can just double click to run them. The first one is to install MySQL itself. You want to do that first. After that, you can do the startup item. That's going to allow MySQL to start up when your Mac starts up. And then the MySQL preference pane will add a preference pane to your system preferences so that then you can control MySQL from there. So those would be the three things you want to pick, and in every case, just accept the defaults that it gives you whenever there are choices. It's pretty easy to install that way. However, I think Homebrew is even easier than that is. Let's go back to the command line, and I'm going to actually install it using Homebrew. All I have to do is say brew install MySQL. And it's going to go out and download the package. It'll take a little while for yours to download. For me, I already had a copy downloaded in its caches, so it didn't have to do that process again. But one nice thing is that when it goes out to the server, it knows what your processor is, and it knows what your operating system versions are. And you can see here, it picked the one for Mountain Lion, right? That's the version of the operating system that I have. So it picks the correct one for you. You don't have to make that choice. And that's really nice. Then when it's finally done with the install, it comes up and it gives us some caveats. We can ignore this. It's basically just saying if you had a file here, it could cause problems. I don't have one there, and chances are you don't either. And then it says if we want to connect, this is how we connect to the server. And then it gives us some more notes. If we want it to launch at startup, the same thing as that startup item did that was in the installer, well then we need to also add this line here. And we can just copy that and paste it into our command line to execute it. That's it. That's all there is to it. If we want to load it now, then we can just simply copy this line and it'll go ahead and load it now. Or if you want to just load it just sort of temporarily, turn it on, turn it off manually, you can use mysql.server start. And then the other options would be stop, restart, or status. So you could go ahead and just control it that way from the command line. Now you're not going to have a preference pane here like you would this way. That's the one difference, and the preference pane from here probably won't work with the Homebrew version either. So that's the only downside, but I think it's okay. I think it's pretty easy to just go to the command line and type mysql.server start or mysql server stop or status, and they do the exact same thing as that preference pane does. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. Go ahead and fire it up using the launch control. That's the same thing that would happen if I had rebooted my Mac. It would automatically launch it. And now that it's up, we have MySQL installed and running. And we can check that with MySQL --version. See, it returns a version to me, which MySQL tells me where it's located, and I can actually run it using MySQL-u and then space root. Now you see they didn't put a space here. The space is optional. But what I'm saying is, as the user root, let's log into MySQL. Now, if you've never used MySQL and this is a fresh installation, that will work for you. If you had previously installed this and secured it with a root password, you might also need to provide the -p option, which would let you then type your password. But I'm inside MySQL now, and I can just simply type exit to get back out. Now you remember that after we got it installed, the second step that I said we needed to do was to secure MySQL's root password. Right now, you see we just logged in using root and no password. It's a much better practice to go ahead and require a password even for root to log in. So we're going to do that with the MySQL admin tool. MySQL admin -root and then just type password. Okay, we'll hit return. It's going to say, what is our new password? If you had a previous password, you could provide the -p option. It would ask for your old password first and then your new password. So what do we want to make our password here? I'll just make it secret password. It's going to want us to type it again, secret password. And there we are. Now, I can't simply type MySQL-u root. It says, nope, you need to provide a password. The -p option will now come up and ask me for that, secret password. And now I'm in. So finally, I'll just exit back out of MySQL. The final step is going to be to install the MySQL Ruby gem. So I'm going to clear my screen with Command K. We've installed Ruby gems before. It's very simple. We just type gem install and then the name of the gem. So MySQL. But wait, before you hit return, MySQL used to be the main gem that we would use for Ruby on Rails. But there's a new and improved version, and the way that you get it is MySQL 2. It's actually a completely separate version created by someone else, but it's the version that we should be using. Not just MySQL, but MySQL 2. So that's what you want to make sure you add to the end of that. And then hit return. It'll go out, it'll get the version, bring it back, and install it in our Ruby gems. Now it says building native extensions. That's because it actually builds code for us that's in something like C so that it's able to run really, really fast. And that's it. We now have MySQL installed and configured, and Ruby can talk to MySQL via this gem. We're ready to move on to the final pieces that we'll need in order to be able to develop with Ruby on Rails.